Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I would like to talk to you about this profit percent series that I'm launching. In this series, I'll create multiple strategies and each strategy will have an arrows indicator like this one. So the arrows indicator will be there and it will make take profit and stop loss predictions, and it will study the past bars, and it will also show you the profit and loss percentages, like how many times take profit is hit, how many times stop loss is hit, and finally it will also show you a scanner dashboard which will have all the take profit percentages and when a buy or a sell arrow occurs. So the arrows indicator and the scanner, they will be sold separately on the MetaTrader site. I'll share all the links in the description. So the first strategy of this series is stock Ichimoku with ATR. Let me first tell you how the base strategy works, and then I'll explain all the settings in details, and finally I'll show you the best ways to use it for long-term trading, for scalping, etc. How the base strategy works. Firstly, to get the main signal, we have these possibilities: stochastic or RSI or CCI, overbought and oversold conditions. In the settings, we can specify multiple indicators as comma separated values, and the very first indicator, right now we have stochastic, so the very first indicator will act as a main signal. So whenever the stochastic goes overbought, it will act as a down arrow for a sell signal, and whenever it goes oversold, it will act as an up arrow for a buy signal. And all the other comma separated values of this list, they will act as validating indicators, and these are all optional. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let me just go to the indicator settings, and initially I'll just keep only stochastic. We'll just see how the main signal works, and let me keep everything else to false. I'll go over each of these settings in detail, don't worry. And I'll also temporarily just hide the stop loss and take profit lines, because right now with just the stochastic selected, we will get a lot of arrows. Right. So if we have stochastic alone, we see that it goes overbought and oversold several times. Let me just put the stochastic oscillator and everything is default, and let me just hide the signal line and only keep the main line. If we have stochastic alone, then we get a lot of overbought and oversold signals. So to limit these, we can keep a second indicator in this list which will check that the stochastic is safely within the overbought and oversold range. So I'll keep that as stochastic as well, and the first indicator has a period of 14, and the second indicator, which is a validating indicator, that has a period of 150, and the first one has overbought and oversold 80-20, and for second one we are setting 65-35 and these values. So all of these comma separated values, they will correspond to these indicators that we have selected. So right now by doing that, we will limit the arrows somewhat, and let me just open up the second stochastic. I'll keep this 150, these were 1, and let me just change the color so that we can see the lines. Yes, so now whenever an overbought signal happens and we get a down arrow, it will check whether this pink line is within the overbought and oversold range, and we had specified 35 and 65 for the second one. So let me just set those levels. So as you can see, by having this second oscillator, we are limiting the signals by a lot, and we are getting good arrow signals, but still the take profit percentages are quite low. And here with the second stochastic, we are measuring that the price is safely between the overbought and oversold levels. But suppose if you wanted the pink line to be overbought or oversold as well, to be beyond overbought and oversold, then what you can try is just go to the settings and the second value right here, instead of 65 over here, if we use 35, and instead of 35 over here, if we use 65 instead, then it will check the reverse condition. So let me just press OK, and right here we had 42%, and now the percent has gotten better. And let me also try another value. Instead of 35, let's go with 20, and instead of 65, let's go with 80. It will instead check that it has gone beyond overbought and oversold levels. And as you can see, the percentage has improved a lot. So you can use either of those checks for this second validation indicator. And let me set it back. So you can just play around with these settings and see the ones which work best for you. Let me go back. Right. So the very first thing is the main signal, main arrow signal, and the second thing that it will check is trend. So we can use Ichimoku trend, or we can use EMA higher time frame trend. Let me go back. How the Ichimoku will work, I'll also share the link of my website in which I have everything explained in great detail, so you could use that as reference. For Ichimoku buy signals, we can have all of these checks are optional. So for buy signal, we can check if price is above Kumo cloud, we can check if Tenkan is above Kijun, and Chiku span is away from Kumo cloud and above, and also away from price and above. And we can also specify minimum distances in points. For sell, we have all of these only in reverse. So let me go back to the settings, and one by one let's set the Ichimoku settings. So we already talked about the main signal, and all of these are the stochastic settings that we can use, or we can also use RSI, CCI, and we can also specify the periods over here as we like, but by default it's a stochastic. Yeah, so let's go to the Ichimoku settings that we were talking about. So right here everything is default, all the settings that Ichimoku uses, and we can check if price is above the Kumo cloud for buy and below for sell. And we can also specify a minimum distance right here, and we can specify if Tenkan is above Kijun and if Chiku is away from, if we keep all of these to true. And if we look at the percentages right here, so far we have 194 signals and we have very less take profit percentages. with just setting the Ichimoku, it will find good trends and it will limit these arrow signals further. So now we have 44 signals, and as you can see, the percentage has climbed way up. And finally, along with Ichimoku, we can also specify the EMA trend. We can keep this, if we just want to use EMA trend, then keep all of these to false and keep EMA trend to true. But right now let's try using both Ichimoku and EMA trend together and just take a look at these percentage values. So as you can see, after using EMA, the number of signals went from 44 to only 17, and the take profit climbed from 84 to 88. So with EMA, you will get very specific signals and very high percentage values, but the number of signals will be very low. Let me go back. You can play around with the settings. You can try a different MA period and a different, instead of EMA you could try with another MA type, and you can just play around with these settings. Yeah, as we had seen, we have the main signal and then we have a trend check, and using at least Ichimoku we get much higher percentages. Adding EMA we get even higher percentages, but the number of signals is very low. And finally, it will use ATR for stop loss and take profit predictions. Right here we have all of these ATR values with which it will create ATR channels, and those channels are hidden by default, but I'll show you which indicator it uses in the background. And these are the most important settings. These are the multiplier factors, and if you set these to lower values, let me first just turn the stop loss and take profit lines to on. Okay, and I'll show you the ATR channels which it uses to generate this. And right now all of these are default values, so I'll just press OK, and these are the ATR channels which it uses. So the channel numbering is done as follows right here. As you can see, this green line is the middle channel, and all the channels above it are numbered 1, 2, 3, and below it are -1, -2, -3. So for take profit, basically keep positive values, and for stop losses keep negative values. Let me show you how you can define those. These are the stop loss and take profit numbers. So right now we have stop loss is set to -2 and -3. Take profit is set to 2 and 3. So right here, as you can see, this line will become take profit 1, and this line will become take profit 2. This will become the stop loss 1 and stop loss 2. And if you wanted to have more stop loss, like if you wanted to use -1, the first band, and take profit, then keep an eye right here. We will get TP1, 2 and 3, and since this TP1 is slightly above and SL1 is very close to the price, so as you can see, the SL1, the TP1 percentage has decreased. So if you feel like the stop loss is too close, you can also change the stop loss. Instead of -1, you can keep -2, -2 and -3. So that will shift the stop loss further. And right here, the second line is used by both stop loss 1 and stop loss 2. You can play around with those settings as you like. Let me just remove the ATR channels. I'll share the download for the ATR channels on my website download section, and all the extra indicators, templates, and good settings, everything I'll share it on my website. So let me just delete this and the stochastic for now. Next up, let's go back to the website and the stats calculations. So we have several options for those. Like if you sometimes what might happen is when you get the arrow signal and that has already hit the take profit 1, in that case you might want to ignore that arrow because it's already reached too far. Or you might also if you're not using the trend check for Ichimoku or EMA, you might sometimes get arrow signals that are too close together. So in that case you might want to ignore the second signal. So for that we also have some settings to ignore all of these extra signals. So first of all, this one, calculate success rate. If you want this panel and if you want all of these calculations made, keep that to true. And if you are only interested in getting the arrows for the strategy, then you can keep that to false. Now exit on new and opposite signal. What might happen is, let me set everything to false so that we get too many arrows. In that case you'll see what I mean. So right here we have multiple arrows, and whenever you see this yellow cross, it means that a down signal had come right here, and before a stop loss or a take profit, any of these values could be hit. Before that you got a new signal right here. The bar before that will be recorded as a loss. That will be counted as this new signal exit percentage. So right now we have 164 signals, and out of those 11 ones are losses because a new signal has occurred. But if you set that value to false, then in that case it won't look for new and opposite signals. It will keep checking for take profit despite the new signal. And as I talked before, ignore signal if take profit 1 was already hit. By default it is true. And finally this, like if signals are too close together, then you can specify a minimum number of bars between two signals that you would like to have. So if by default this is 5, and if you want fewer signals you can maybe keep it to 10. So in that case, like if I keep this to 10, then right here as you can see we have an up arrow, and this blue cross mark, this indicates a signal which has been ignored, and if you go over that you can see the reason for why it was ignored. Same direction soon, and right here we have this, and this one is ignored because TP1 was already hit. So all of these blue crosses you can figure out why a signal had been ignored. And as you can see, all of these are take profit values and stop losses, they are too close together or sometimes a bit afar. That's because the ATR channels, they work on the current volatility of the market. So if the market is very volatile, then the ATR channels will be further apart, and if the market is ranging and kind of slow, then these ATR channels will get really close together right here as you can see. So when you get signals like this where take profits are very close, and if you are trading long term, then I would suggest that you ignore those signals. But if you are scalping, then in that case these closer together signals are quite good. So let me hide the ATR channels. Let's go back and I'll set all the settings to true, and let's keep EMA to false. So going back to settings again. So let me just quickly talk about these top three values. If you are using this arrows indicator and you have multiple settings files, or maybe if you are using this inside an EA, then you can specify a particular settings file, and that needs to be inside the files folder. In MetaTrader, the terminal, you have this MQL4 folder, and inside that you have the files folder. So if you have a settings file, let me take this for example, and if you keep that, then it will use this settings file and it will ignore all of these settings. This will override all these settings. So let me press OK, and as you can see, we are now using that new settings file. The second one is a prefix, and make sure that this prefix is a unique one and no other indicator on your chart is using the same prefix, because for drawing all of these take profit stop loss lines, for drawing this dashboard, it uses this prefix, and when you unload the indicator, then it will unload all of these objects. So if you're using the same prefix for another indicator, it might accidentally delete those objects as well. And the next one is maxed past bars. It will go through these number of bars and it will find the signals. So suppose if I have only 100 bars, then it will get only like 31 signals right here. And if it doesn't find any signals at all, like the past 10 bars do not have any arrows, so it will, oh, I'm sorry, it's overriding the settings file, right? I'll just remove that. Right, so for these 10 bars there were no arrows, so we get 0 signals. By default this is kept at 5000, but if you want to know like how the market is behaving very recently, you can set that to like say 500, and in that case you will get that okay, the most recent 3 signals, they were all successful, and so you know that this pair is doing quite well. Now let's go back and let me show you how the minimum distances are calculated. The minimum distance will be converted into points. Like if you are trading Euro USD, and right here, this is where the Kumo cloud is, and if you say that you want price to be at least 10 points above the Kumo cloud, then it will check that price is at least above this particular price if your Kumo is right here for a buy signal. And this is if you're trading with something like Euro USD. If you're using something like dollar yen, and if your price is somewhere around there, sorry, your Kumo cloud is somewhere around there, and if you say that you want your price to be at least 10 points above the Kumo, then it will be converted to points, so it will check that value. So that's how the minimum distances are calculated, and you can just specify like 10 or 20 based on your strategy. And next up, we already talked about the EMA. So it will check, if you keep this as true, then it will check the number of current and higher time frames for trend alignment. So if you have 3 right here, then it will, and you are trading on H1, then it will check the current time frame H1, and for buy signals it will check if price is above the EMA line, and for sell signal it will check if price is below that, and it will also check 2 higher time frames, so H4 and D1. Now if you keep this as 4, then it will check H1, H4, D1 and W1. So you can, by default this is set at 3, but you can play around with those settings, and the default period is 200, and you can change the MA method or the price. You can also use close price. And then we already talked about the ATR and how the stop loss and take profit are calculated. Now you can set this multiplier factor, and depending on these values the ATR channels will be closer together or further apart. Like right now, if you are doing some long-term trading, then you can keep these as further apart. But if you are scalping and if you want these values to be closer together, you can specify something like 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. So press OK, and as you can see right here, these are closer together. So you'll get the percentages based on those. Let me keep that to 5000 instead of 500. So as you can see, since the stop loss is closer also, you can see that the take profit percentage has gone down slightly, and because the TP1 is now much closer, you can see that the number of ignored signals has become quite high, because the take profit has already been reached for several of those signals. So let me just set that back to the default values. Trade with ATR channels 2 and 3 onwards. Like if I remove this first, and also make sure that the number of stop loss values and the number of take profit values are the same, these comma separated ones, because TP1 is compared with SL1, TP2 is compared with SL2. So if you don't have the same number of values, it might give you an error. Right. So now you can see that the number of ignored values is much less, because that TP1 was way too close. Finally, these are the stats on and off settings. So if you want to calculate these success rates, and if you want this panel, then keep that to true. We already saw exit on new signal, ignore properties, and finally we have the alerts. If you have see detailed journal logs, then every time a signal is ignored, or if the stochastic goes overbought or oversold, all of those you will see them in detail in the journals in your experts tab. So that way you can find out the exact reason why a particular trade or a particular signal was cancelled or ignored. And the next one is if you want pop-up alerts or sound alerts and push notifications, email, all of these are for alerts. And finally, if you want to draw these stop loss and take profit lines, keep that to true. And if you just want to see the arrows, you can set that to false. If you want this success rate panel hidden, you can set that to false. And if you want to hide the arrows, you can set that to false. And show SLTP point values. By default this is false, because it can be it can be quite cluttering, but I'll set that to true, and you will see that take profit is these many points below, and TP2 is right here, SL1 and SL2. So this might give you a better idea, but if you're only interested in SLTP lines, then by default that is set to false. And finally, if you don't want to see the SLTP labels, if you feel like it's cluttering it too much, you can set that to false, and it will hide the SL1 TP1. It will just show you these lines because it's quite understood that this is TP1 and this is TP2. And if you do want to see those SLTP lines, but if you want the font size to be a bit smaller, you can set this. I set it from 8 to 6, and you can notice that it's much smaller now. And finally, the arrow size. If you want bigger arrows, you can set that to something like 2. If you want smaller arrows, you can set that to back to 1. And the arrow distance multiplier, right now, like if you keep it as 0, then this arrow will be touching the high of the bar right here. But if you keep that to 2 or like 1.5 or 2, then the arrows will be much farther. Just set that to maybe 0.5, and you'll see. Yeah, and finally we have this stats panel settings. So you can specify the you can change the position, and you can change the Y space. This is this distance between these entries, and you can change the font size. If you want to make it smaller, you can maybe go with a 7 or something, and you can change the width. And all of these are the colors, and this color stop loss, it is the same, like this color and the color for these are the same, and color for take profit and right here. And if the new signal exit happens and you get a yellow cross and this color, you can change it to, like if you are using a lighter background and you want these to be darker, you can change it. And the ignore crosses that we saw earlier, you can change that color too. And this is the stats background, this one, the background of this box right here. And all of these settings that I showed you, the main signal and stochastic, Ichimoku and EMA, all of these are the same for our dashboard. But in the dashboard, these stats, the success rate panel and showing of all of these arrows, etc., that is by default. You won't see those settings. So let me show you what the dashboard looks like. The dashboard will only have the take profit percentage values. So let me go to the dashboard settings. Right, now you can also, if you want to know how many bars back we saw an arrow, so you can maybe set this to, like if I have 10 bars, it will scan for the past 10 bars to see if an arrow signal had occurred. And this is a unique prefix. If you want multiple dashboards on the same chart, then keep a unique prefix. Let me just put that as 1. And next you can specify how many pairs you would like. And if you have your own pair list, then you can select a list of comma separated values, that if that it will select. Let me just go back to, let's say, 14, and these are the time frames, font size, and number of columns. Like right now we have 2 columns. Let me try with 1, and this x-axis and y-axis to position the dashboard. And finally, when you click any of these buttons, it will open up that particular pair for that particular time frame, and if this is set to true, it will open it in a new window. And you can also specify a template. I have a template obos.tpl file already in my templates folder, but you can create your own custom template. Now if you have way too many pairs, and if you feel like the dashboard isn't fitting enough, you can also decrease this row height and this row width by specifying negative values over here. Like if I specify -5, then you'll see that the height of these rows will shrink. So let me just show you all the changes that I've made so far. And as you can see, the dashboard has now gotten smaller, and we had set only a single column, and we have set the pair list to 14 pairs, the 4x core 14 pairs. And we had set that it will scan the previous bars, and it will find if there were any up or down arrows. So the bracket is like 2 bars back there was an up arrow, 2 bars back there was a down arrow. And you can also change the button width. You can decrease it or increase it. And all of these alerts are the same as we saw in the arrows indicator. And right here, all of these settings, maxed pass bars and stochastic, these settings for Ichimoku, all of these are exactly the same. And how the SLTP calculations are done, and the multiplication factor, and the comma separated values. And finally, the stats on off settings. You can specify exit on new opposite signal, or if TP1 is already hit or not, so, and ignore the same direction. And finally, this buy and sell signal color. So if the arrow is on the current bar, then the background of that particular box, if it is a buy signal, it will change to this green color. If it's a sell signal, it will change to this red color, and you will get that alerts pop up. And you can also set the take profit percent threshold. By default it's at 80, but if you maybe keep it at 60, then all of these values above 60, they will light up green. So you can set the threshold values to what you like. And if you want multiple dashboards for comparing, this one has the default settings. And let me just open up another dashboard. And for the first one, we had mentioned ABR scan 1. For this one, I'll mention 2 to make it completely unique, because if I just leave it at ABR scan, there might be conflicts between the 2 dashboards. And let me go to 14, and all the other settings are default. And finally, let me keep the EMA aligned to false. That's the only change. Oh, I forgot to set the x-axis. Now the dashboard will overlap. Let me set the number of columns to 1, and let me set the x-axis to something like 500 or 600. . and earlier we had changed the row height, so this one feels a bit compact and this one feels a bit bigger. So if you have multiple pairs, you can play around with the font size and the row height to make it more compact. Right, so as you can see the difference, like this one doesn't use the EMA, only Ichimoku for trend, and this one uses, let me just change the threshold so that they are exactly alike. So that way you will know that okay, this particular pair is trading very well with just the Ichimoku settings, and this particular pair is trading well with EMA settings as well. And you can play around with different settings and find out which pairs and which time frames are the most profitable. So now the best way to trade, like if you are using trend, then by default all the settings that we have, they are great for trading. And if you are using, like if you want to use scalping, then I would suggest that you move the stop loss and take profits a bit closer, like 1.5, 2.5, 3.5. And you can also play around with TP1, TP2 percent. You can keep all the stop losses at -3 suppose, and you can take profit at 1, 2, 3. So that might be very useful if you are doing scalping, then keeping stop losses a bit further. And as you can see, we get higher percentages, but we have to be very careful because now the ratio of stop loss and take profit, it's no longer 1:1, it's 1:3. So you have to be very careful while trading this for scalping. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You can go over the website and all the settings, and you can go to the download section and download some of the templates and some of the settings files. If you want to try it out, you can just go to this MetaTrader site and you can download the arrows indicator or the scanner for demo, and you can try it out on the strategy tester. But for scanner, the strategy tester will only allow a single pair for a single time frame, so you can at least try it out that way, like how the dashboard works, what the settings are. Yeah, this video has run a bit long, and that's pretty much it. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions, and I'll keep making more such indicators for my profit percent series, and I'll share with you the videos for those as well. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.